An unexpected chime shattered the quiet of my living room. The antique landline, a relic I kept for reasons even I couldn't explain. The red message light blinked insistently. What I heard next would unravel 15 years of carefully constructed peace. Lachlan, it's me. I know this is sudden, but if you're open to it, I truly need to talk. Her voice, Delilah. After all this time, she didn't have to identify herself. The familiar lilt, the slight tremor, it was unmistakable. I replayed the message 4 times, 5, before sinking into the worn armchair. It groaned under my weight, as if echoing my own reluctance to revisit a ghost. 15 years, not a single card, email, or fleeting glance. Then, without warning, Delilah Lennox dropped her presence into my home, as if she'd never torched our life, and walked away without so much as a backward glance. I didn't delete the recording, not because I wanted to hear it again, but because I feared I might convince myself it had never happened at all. Let's rewind, not to the first spark or the vows exchange. Those chapters are long closed. Let's instead go back to a single, unremarkable Tuesday. The sky outside was a bruised gray, and my morning coffee tasted like ash. She walked in wearing a bright yellow trench coat, a stark contrast to the gloom, and simply stated, "We need to talk." That was the final echo of normalcy I remember. There were no tears, no wavering resolve. She just calmly announced she was leaving. No discussion, no suggestion of counseling, no explanation beyond a vague revelation that she'd found a connection that jolted her awake, and she refused to sleepwalk through life any longer. I asked his name. She uttered it like a cherished secret, a tender sigh breathed 1,000 times into hotel pillows I never touched. Gideon Thorne. Then she collected 3 travel bags, left her keys on the kitchen island, and drove off in the car I'd finished paying for only weeks prior. Gideon Thorne. A man I later discovered was married, considerably older, and significantly wealthier. He had an entire life, a wife and children, neatly compartmentalized on one side of the city, while he built a fantasy world with my wife on the other. Delilah had called me too predictable, too soft. She craved an adrenaline rush, a feeling of being truly alive. The cruel irony. I felt a piece of myself die that day, and she never once glanced back to witness the devastation. For years, I lost my appetite. Friendships withered, people unsure of what to say. I even started muttering to myself in grocery store aisles, just to hear a voice that hadn't betrayed me. Now she was calling. I dug up her old number. It was still linked to an alias she once used for discreet hotel bookings. D. Lena. The sheer audacity. No one reappears after 15 years of absolute silence unless something has gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. People like Delilah don't apologize unless they're sinking. So here I was grappling with a profound question. Do I answer the siren call, or do I let her drown in the very silence she so meticulously created? I didn't call her back. Not immediately. I did what any broken, half-healed man would do. I paced my apartment, the familiar floorboards creaking beneath me, as if still awaiting her return from one of her fabricated client meetings. I even peered out the window, half expecting her car to be parked outside, Delilah leaning against it as if it were still 2010 and our entire world hadn't imploded. Instead, I eventually sat down and opened the worn file I'd sworn I'd never touch again. I labeled it Closure, a bitter lie. Inside were digital snapshots, faded receipts, a chilling email from Gideon's wife, and the infamous note Delilah had taped to our fridge when she left. She hadn't even signed it with love, just her name, stark as a resignation letter. Lach, I need something different. Don't hate me, D. That was it. No goodbye. That note used to tear me apart. Now it only left me cold. Back then, I was too shattered to react. I didn't expose her. I didn't confront Gideon. I didn't even tell our closest friends the truth of her departure. I simply said we'd grown apart. I meticulously shielded her reputation while she systematically dismantled mine. She got to be the courageous woman who followed her heart. I was merely the sad, pitiable figure at every barbecue. One mutual friend even remarked, "At least she was honest." honest, she'd been intimately involved with a married man behind my back for months. If that's honesty, then perhaps my understanding of the concept was fundamentally flawed. Still, 15 years transforms a man, or so I believed. I meticulously built new routines, stacking them high enough to keep the insidious loneliness at bay. I picked up night shifts, anything to avoid lying awake wondering where she was. I relocated to a smaller, quieter town. I adopted a loyal dog. I never remarried. Yet here I was, inexplicably fractured by 6 simple words. I truly need to talk. I finally dialed her number 2 nights later. My palms were slick with sweat. Part of me desperately hoped she wouldn't pick up, but she did. Her voice unchanged, still warm, still deliberate, still possessing the power to make me feel 17 and utterly invisible. Locke, she murmured, as if she had every right to speak my name. I shouldn't have called, she added, but I had to. Had to what? She didn't begin with an apology. Of course not. Delilah never conformed to conventional expectations. She asked how I was. I told her I was alive. A soft, almost amused laugh escaped her, as if my answer held some profound humor. Then came the unexpected revelation. I was wrong, she confessed. I believed I was chasing something real, but everything I abandoned for it disintegrated, and I've been carrying this burden for so long. I remained silent, simply listening. She recounted how Gideon never left his wife, how after 2 years of clandestine hotel rooms and whispered promises, he simply ghosted her, vanishing without a trace. She spent a year adrift, drowning in alcohol, couch surfing, eventually returning to her mother's house. She claimed she'd considered calling me 100 times, but shame had held her captive. She wasn't calling to fix anything now. She just wanted to be heard. I just needed to know, she whispered, if you ever truly hated me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to hurl the phone against the wall and walk away from this torturous conversation. But what I actually said was infinitely worse. No, I told her, my voice raw. You don't get to ask that. And I hung up. I wish I could claim a surge of power, a triumphant dusting off of dignity. I wish I could say I walked away from that call a man finally free. But that would be a lie. The truth? My hands trembled violently. My chest felt like a hollowed-out cavity. For the next 3 nights, sleep offered no respite. I couldn't manage more than 30 minutes without being pulled into agonizing dreams. I was back in that old apartment, the one we'd shared before she detonated everything. In one dream, she sat at the kitchen table, just as she used to on Sunday mornings, sipping tea and sketching client ideas. In another, I held her as she wept. And in the most harrowing, she was laughing with him, while I stood in the doorway, a non-existent specter. So no victory lap, just a heavier burden. The following morning, she texted me. I'd completely forgotten she still had my number. Perhaps I'd never changed it. A subconscious reluctance to erase every trace, just in case someday she might apologize. I used to fantasize about that moment, a text declaring, I ruined everything, and I was wrong. Instead, all I received was, please don't hang up next time. I need to tell you something. I stared at the message for hours. I even typed out replies, angry ones, sarcastic ones. One simply read, too late, but I sent none of them. The cruelest part of being abandoned is that you remain trapped in all the places they neglected to tidy up. The unanswered questions, the versions of yourself you buried to preserve their memory, the self-deceptions you embraced to function at work, at family gatherings, in life itself. Now she wanted to unearth it all. That night I called her again, not out of a desire for forgiveness, not because I missed her, but because I could no longer pretend it didn't still affect me. Stop. Before you continue, ask yourself, are you ready for a truth that will redefine everything you thought you knew? She answered instantly, as if she'd been waiting, phone in hand. I'm glad you called, she said. Don't thank me, I retorted. You said you needed to tell me something. So talk. A long silence stretched between us. Then she finally spoke the words that would shatter my remaining illusions. It wasn't just Gideon. For a second, I didn't comprehend. I thought she meant it metaphorically, that it wasn't only about him or that other issues contributed. But no, she meant exactly what she said. There were others, she confessed. Not many, but before Gideon, during us. My tongue felt like ash. I couldn't speak. I heard her shallow breathing on the other end, waiting for me to scream, to hang up again. But I simply sat there, stunned into silence, as she unspooled a truth I had never asked for. I cheated on you first, Lachlan, with a client's husband. Her voice cracked. Do you remember Lysander Kane, the one who complimented the kitchen lighting at our holiday party? It started with him. It ended quickly, but it opened something in me. And after that, I looked at you differently, like I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. She was weeping now. I remained frozen. A buried part of me had always suspected, the late nights, the subtle shifts in her demeanor. But hearing her articulate it so plainly, as if it were just another detail in her narrative, rendered everything I'd painstakingly rebuilt feel paper thin. Why are you telling me this? I finally managed. Because, she sobbed, I saw your name on a fundraiser last month. You donated to a children's hospital in my mother's name. You didn't know, but I saw it, and I realized you're still the man I didn't deserve, and I needed you to know the truth, all of it, before I disappear again. The most insidious pain arrives after you've already healed, when the scar tissue has formed over years, and someone brutally tears it open just to prove there's still fresh blood beneath. That's what her confession did to me. I believed I had processed everything. Gideon, the betrayal, her departure, the years of silence. But I never anticipated more. I never braced myself for others. I remembered Lysander Kane. Of course I did. He'd shaken my hand like a man perfectly comfortable sleeping with another man's wife. He'd said something peculiar that night, too. He told Delilah she cleaned up nice. I dismissed it as harmless at the time. I dismissed so many things as harmless back then. My naivete wasn't merely sad, it was deeply humiliating. I told her to stop. Not because I didn't want to hear it, but because I recognized the pattern. She'd drip-feed me the truth in agonizing small doses, each one designed to mitigate the impact of the last. This was never about my healing. It was about her unburdening. I didn't call you to make you feel worse, she said softly. I called because I don't know who else would care if I died tomorrow. There it was, the raw, unfiltered reason. She wasn't sorry. She was just utterly, terribly lonely. She began to cry again. Not the kind of cry that demands comfort, but the kind that turns you into a mirror, reflecting your own past sorrows. I sat there in silence, thinking of all the nights I'd pleaded for an explanation she never gave. All the times I'd reached for her, and she'd recoiled. And now she wanted me to carry her grief. So I asked the one question I had never dared to articulate. Ready to hear the brutal truth that reshaped my entire understanding of our life? Why did you stay with me at all, Delilah? Why go through the motions for 11 years if your heart was already walking out the door? Her answer was cruelly honest. Because I thought you'd never leave me. You were the safest place I'd ever known. You didn't challenge me. You adored me. And after everything I'd done, I needed to feel like I still mattered to someone. That hit me harder than any of the affairs. I wasn't her partner. I was her emotional backup generator. The soft landing for when the thrill wore off and the inevitable consequences came calling. I was never chosen. I was merely available. After that, I said very little. I told her I had to go. She asked if we could talk again sometime. I didn't respond. I ended the call and stared at the blank wall of my living room for almost an hour. Then, for reasons I still can't fully articulate, I opened my closet and pulled out a dusty box I hadn't touched since 2011. Inside were our wedding photographs, the champagne cork we'd saved from our honeymoon, a crumpled note she'd once written that read, "Forever promise." I burned it all, quietly alone in the kitchen sink. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just let it all turn to ash. But that wasn't the end, not even close. 3 days later, an envelope appeared in my mail. No return address, just my name handwritten in a script I hadn't seen in over a decade. Inside was a single handwritten page, not typed. It read, "You should know I have a daughter. She's not Gideon's. She's not Lysander's either. She's yours. I found out just before I left. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to tie you to my mess. But she wants to meet you now. Her name is Malia." My world tilted sideways. I must have read that letter 20 times. She's yours. Her name is Malia. At first I dismissed it as some twisted manipulation, a last-ditch emotional grenade Delilah had lobbed to keep herself from sinking. But the more I read, the more I realized it wasn't desperate. It was quiet, almost frightened. As if she wasn't trying to convince me. She was bracing herself for my inevitable rejection, for my silence. I didn't sleep that night. I roamed my apartment, the crumpled letter clutched in my fist, muttering her name, Malia, as if repeating it enough times would conjure a 15-year-old girl, full of answers to questions I never dared ask. I kept doing the math in my head. When Delilah left, she wasn't visibly pregnant. She hadn't said a single word about it. Nothing in her letter, her calls, or her voicemail had even hinted at this possibility. And yet, 15 years. The timeline. It added up painfully, perfectly. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I searched for her online. New last name, new city, no public social media. But I found a local newspaper article from the previous year highlighting a high school art competition. There was a picture of a girl named Malia Arden holding a frame painting of a winter street. Her eyes were green, exactly like mine. Her awkward, tentative smile was one I'd seen reflected in my own face for most of my life. That was all the confirmation I needed. In 7 days, your life will change forever. I sat in front of that image for hours, paralyzed by this impossible storm of emotions. I was furious, grieving, terrified, but the deepest feeling was shame. I had missed everything. First steps, first words, first day of school. I missed it all because Delilah decided I wasn't worthy of the truth. I texted her one word, "Why?" She replied within minutes, "Because I didn't trust myself and I didn't trust you'd want her." Want her? She was my daughter. I called her immediately. No pleasantries this time. I cut straight through the years of bitterness. "Why now, Delilah? Why? Tell me now. Is she sick? Are you dying? What's the real reason?" She sounded exhausted. More than that, fragile. She asked. She said she's been asking for years. I kept insisting it didn't matter, that you wouldn't want to be involved, that you had your own life. But I saw her one night, looking through old photo albums, and she found the one of us at the lake, the only one I didn't destroy. And she asked, "Is that him?" I couldn't lie anymore. Silence stretched between us for nearly a minute. It wasn't the angry kind. It was the kind where both people acknowledge the damage is already done, and there's no fixing it, only acceptance. I asked the question that had echoed since the moment I opened that envelope. Does she know? She knows you're her father. She knows I lied to you. She doesn't hate you, Lachlan. She's just curious. She wants to meet you. She wants to know where she came from. I don't know what I expected, but what she said next shattered me in a way nothing else had. She paints snow because she says it feels honest, cold but clear. She gets that from you. I never told her, but I see it. That sentence undid me. For years, I believed Delilah had stripped me of everything, my dignity, my trust, my future. But it turned out she'd taken something far more profound, the chance to be someone's father. And now that someone wanted to find me, I told Delilah to send me a number. I didn't want her as the middleman. I didn't want more filtered truths. I wanted to speak to Malia directly. She agreed, said she'd talk to Malia first, then send me her contact. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. A week later, I received another message. Not from Delilah, but from Malia herself. "Hi, Lachlan. I hope it's okay," I texted. "I have a question. Why didn't you ever try to find me?" Her message struck deeper than anything Delilah had ever said. Why didn't you ever try to find me? There it was. The question that sliced directly through the walls I'd painstakingly built over the years. I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at those words until the screen dimmed and went dark. I didn't even know where to begin typing a response. What could I possibly say that didn't sound like a pathetic excuse? Because your mother didn't tell me. Because I didn't know you existed. Because I spent 15 years convincing myself that every door was closed, so I never thought to knock. Eventually I typed, Malia, I didn't know. I just found out about you. Seconds later, she responded, I figured. Mom always made it sound like you wouldn't care. That cut me to the bone. I don't know what to stung more, her belief that I wouldn't care, or the fact that her mother had painted me that way for Malia's entire life. I wanted to yell, to curse Delilah's name, to pour all 15 years of suppressed rage into a single message. But this wasn't about Delilah anymore. This was about a 15-year-old girl asking a stranger why he hadn't come looking for her. I asked if she wanted to talk, not over text. Her reply came almost instantly. Yes. We set up a video call for that evening. I cleaned my apartment 3 times, not because it was messy, but because I didn't want her to see the life I had settled into. Quiet, colorless, isolated. I changed shirts twice, practiced smiling in the mirror. I looked utterly ridiculous. I didn't care. When the call finally connected, my heart nearly stopped. She looked just like my sister at that age. The same dark wavy hair, the same defined eyebrows, the same skeptical eyes. But she had Delilah's lips, that soft, slightly closed smile that used to disarm me before I ever understood how dangerous it truly was. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. And then, for a few painful seconds, we simply looked at each other. You're taller than I imagined, she said with a nervous laugh. I smiled. You're quieter than I expected. I get that from you, apparently. It was awkward, but not agonizing. In fact, it felt strangely familiar. We talked for 40 minutes. She asked about my job, my favorite movie, whether I preferred dogs or cats. It felt like a bizarre first date with my own daughter. But then the questions deepened. Did you love her? She asked. I hesitated. Yes, I said. Once, very much. And do you hate her now? I didn't lie. Some days. Other days I just feel pity. She nodded, as if she understood. And then she told me something that completely blindsided me. She's sick. Mom. She has early-stage lymphoma. That's why she called you. She didn't want to die with everything still a secret. I felt the air leave the room. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to yell, to confirm that. Of course, there had to be a reason she was suddenly interested in making peace. But the other part, the one that still remembered how she looked in candlelight, how she laughed during thunderstorms, how she used to trace circles on my arm when she couldn't sleep. That part hurt, and I hated it. Why didn't she tell me that herself, I asked. She didn't want pity. She said she owed you the truth, not her illness. I didn't know whether to respect that or resent it. Malia looked down. I don't know what I want from you, she said, but I know I don't want to lose the chance to know who I came from. You don't have to be my dad. You can just be here if you want to be. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was simply offering something I never thought I'd be offered, a second chance. And for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt terrified and yet strangely hopeful. I said yes. Not aloud, not immediately, but in the hours that followed our call. As I sat alone in my quiet apartment, replaying every word Malia said, I felt something begin to shift inside me. Not a dramatic realization, not forgiveness or immediate clarity, just a quiet decision. I didn't want to be a ghost to her anymore. I had already missed enough, so I texted her the next morning. Would you like to meet in person? Her reply came faster than I expected. Yes, I would. She suggested a cafe 2 hours outside the city, neutral territory, somewhere neither of us had any personal history. I agreed, then spent the next 3 days agonizing over what kind of man she would perceive when I walked in. I was nothing like the version Delilah had probably described over the years. I wasn't angry or cruel or absent. I was just tired, a man who had lost the thread of his own life and had never quite picked it back up. Question: what kind of man do you become after losing everything? The day of our meeting, I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the farthest corner of the cafe, facing the door. Every time someone walked in, my heart leaped. When she finally arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older than 15, not physically, but in the way she moved, like someone who had grown up navigating profound silences. Our eyes met, and there was an odd moment where neither of us smiled. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was profoundly real. "Hi," she said, sitting down across from me. "Hi," I replied. She didn't waste time. "So, what now?" That question gutted me because I truly didn't know. I wanted to say I'd be whatever she needed. A father, a friend, a steady presence. But those were just words, and words held very little weight after the life she'd been dealt. So I offered her the only thing I could. Truth. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm here, and I'm not walking away again." She nodded slowly. Then after a pause, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a sketch, black and white charcoal on thick paper. A winter road framed by trees bending under the weight of snow. A single man walking alone down the path. "I made this last year," she said, "before I knew who you were. But I think maybe I was trying to find you even then." I stared at it, and something inside me cracked open. She had drawn me without knowing it. She had captured the exact ache I'd carried all these years. I couldn't speak. I simply nodded and wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "You don't have to make up for lost time," she said. "We can just start from here." This moment wasn't just a meeting, it was a revelation. That line hit harder than anything else. I'd spent so many years drowning in regret over what was irrevocably taken from me that I never believed there could be anything left to salvage. But now here she was, giving me a choice I thought I'd never have again. We sat there for nearly 2 hours. She told me about her school, her art, how she'd always felt a little different, like something essential was missing. And when she found out I existed, she didn't feel betrayed. She felt whole. Before we left, she looked me directly in the eye and said, "She's sorry. You know, Mom, she might never say it the right way, but she is. She talks about you more than she admits." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I wasn't ready to carry Delilah's guilt on top of my own. I had enough of that already. On the drive home, I kept the sketch on the passenger seat. Every few minutes, I looked over at it as if it might disappear, as if this whole thing might still be a dream. That night, I received one more message from Delilah. It was simple. "Thank you for meeting her, and if you're willing, I'd like to see you too. Just once before everything ends." She attached an address, a small house tucked away in the mountains. No pressure, no drama, just an invitation. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding. After everything she'd done, after every lie, every betrayal, could I face her again? Could I walk into that house and look the woman who shattered me in the eye? I didn't know the answer yet, but for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't afraid to find out. It took me 4 days to drive to the address Delilah sent. I told Malia I was going. She didn't try to convince me or talk me out of it. She just said, "Whatever happens, I'm glad I found you." That alone made everything worth it. The house was small, nestled at the edge of a sleepy mountain town, the kind of place where the trees felt taller and time felt slower. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before I walked up to the door. My fingers hovered over the doorbell, shaking. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was afraid of what I might still feel. She opened the door before I even rang, as if she had sensed my arrival. And when our eyes met, I didn't see the woman who had left me. I saw a ghost of the girl I once loved. Thinner, paler, but not broken, just weathered. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. Familiar words, unfamiliar weight. She invited me in. No theatrics, no long, drawn-out speeches. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same way we had for years before everything collapsed. At first, we didn't speak. There was just this quiet, heavy stillness, like both of us were trying to recognize what time had done to the other. "I didn't ask you here to apologize," she finally said. "I know it wouldn't be enough. I asked you here because I didn't want to die pretending I hadn't wrecked something beautiful." I nodded slowly. "You did," I said, "but something else came from it." We talked for over an hour. She didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. There was pain between us, yes, but no more blame. And in the final minutes, she said something I never thought I'd hear. You were always the better one, Lachlan. I just couldn't see it until everything else was gone. Before I left, she asked if I'd come back, not to fix things, just to say goodbye when the time came. I told her I would, not for her, but for my Leah. The drive home felt different, like something profound had been lifted from my chest, a weight I'd carried for far too long. I rolled the windows down, letting the crisp mountain air fill the silence. For the first time in 15 years, it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. Melia texted me that night. Was it awful? I replied, no, it was honest. And that's enough. That weekend, she came over for dinner. We cooked together. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread. She showed me her newest sketchbook. I told her stories about my childhood. And when she left, she hugged me for the first time, tight, like she truly meant it. I still don't know what kind of father I'll be at this point in her life, but I know I'll show up every time. Delilah passed 3 months later. Melia and I attended the memorial together. She held my hand, and afterward, as we watched the wind move through the trees, she whispered, I'm glad she told me who you were. I would have missed you otherwise. I didn't say anything. I just held her hand tighter. Sometimes the past doesn't get rewritten. Sometimes it just makes way for something new. And sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finally being able to breathe without the oppressive weight of the lie on your chest. So yes, this story started with betrayal, but it didn't end there. It ended with something real.